Welcome into Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace. Coming at you, it's Monday, June 23rd. And first and foremost, congratulations to your 2025 NBA champion, Oklahoma City Thunder. Very impressive title run for an extremely deserving team. Unfortunately, the headline coming out of yesterday's Game 7 is what could have been. Felt like we were robbed of potentially an all-time NBA Finals Game 7 moment when Tyrese Haliburton tragically went down with an Achilles injury pretty early in the game, and definitely changed the vibe, changed the momentum of the entire night, and just, again, felt like we were getting robbed as basketball fans for what was going to be a really awesome game. So we're going to talk all about it, obviously starting with the analysis of what took place in the game last night, pre-Haliburton injury, post-Haliburton injury, what this means for the Thunder, where the Pacers go from here. And it was really just a loaded basketball day from top to bottom yesterday. We started off the Game 7 day with a KD trade with Kevin Durant being sent out to the Houston Rockets. So we need to talk about the return for both sides in that trade. Why it was just kind of a bad night for Twitter altogether last night as well. And then the Lakers got sold as well. I was going to talk about that on the last podcast, but figured now that we're pivoting into off-season content, this would be a good time to bring that up as well. So loaded podcast here today. Let's not waste any time and get into it. So to start the game last night, the energy was obviously incredible. Both of these fans all series long have been amazing, so it's no surprise that the Oklahoma City crowd showed up. And honestly, I was pretty impressed with the way that the Pacers started the game. In the back of my mind, my biggest fear heading into this game is that we were just going to get a blowout in some capacity. And honestly, if there was a blowout, I definitely expected OKC to be the ones on top in that situation. So again, I was pulling for Indiana in this one. They started the game pretty well. Nembhard has a jumper. Siakam gets a couple buckets early. And Haliburton himself was balling to start the game, right? He looked pretty aggressive going to the hoop. He got like 5 or 6 shots up in the 7 minutes that he was there. He drilled 3 threes, a couple of them from really deep. And then, of course, we had the tragic calf injury that turned Achilles injury on just a completely normal basketball play where he was looking to drive past Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, went down right away. And this was just such an awful injury. We should probably start there as we're going through this. I mean, it's just one of those things where he obviously acknowledged the risk of having a calf injury and having that calf strain turn into an Achilles injury, eerily similar to what we saw with Kevin Durant in the 2019 NBA Finals, where he was out for like a couple months and then he was coming back before the playoffs and worked his way back from the injury and was kind of shaky health-wise for a couple games and eventually ended up tearing it in Game 5 or Game 6, something like that. But it was one of those things where, again, calf strain turns into an Achilles injury, and you could just tell by Haliburton's face he knew it right away that it was like his biggest fear, which is almost even more messed up. I don't know if it makes it any better or worse knowing that there's that risk heading into the game or if it comes completely out of nowhere like it happened with Jason Tatum, but you just got to think about the insane energy in that building and how it all shifted. It was all respect from the Thunder fans, which is nice to see. But honestly, it felt like post Haliburton injury, it was the Thunder that were kind of in more of a funk. I felt like their intensity from pre-injury to post-injury was more of a fall off from what we actually saw from the Pacers. It seems like, I wouldn't say the Pacers really picked it up, but they were kind of maintained the level that they were at for the rest of that first half. And they were able to stay in the game basically through halftime just with the impressive play from Pascal Siakam. Andrew Nembhard was really great handling the ball a little bit more. And Mathurin right away, I think the coaching staff of Indiana kind of looked over at Ben Mathurin and was like, all right, it needs to be one of your games if we're going to have any chance of winning this thing. And they end the first half on an insane Andrew Nembhard step back, like Harden type thing over Chet Holmgren, drills like a 29-foot shot to put the Pacers up 1 heading into halftime. But I will say, even while Indiana was maintaining that lead and staying in the game during the close of the first half, you could just kind of tell that their entire style of play was different, right? The game got slowed down a ton. They weren't getting nearly as many transition looks. It did feel like it just took a lot of heroics from Nembhard and TJ McConnell just for them to generate any type of offense. Siakam did have a couple buckets later on in the first half, which gave you some confidence. And again, no one in their right mind would doubt Indiana in really any situation, especially when we're looking at such a small sample size, where it definitely felt like they had a chance. But again, I just went back and watched the first 3 quarters of Game 7 earlier today, and I can honestly say the energy and the style at which Indiana played with Haliburton and without him was immediately very noticeable. And it didn't really come to roost until about 3 minutes left in the third quarter. And that's when the game just kind of got blown wide open, just to give you an idea of the sequence. The Pacers were only down 4 at that point in the game with, again, 3.5 minutes left in the third quarter. And then turnovers really took over the game. There was a turnover by Obi Toppin that turned into an open OKC 3 that they drilled. There was another turnover on the play right after that by TJ McConnell that turned into a Cason Wallace layup. And then Thomas Bryant checked into the game, which I was completely blindsided to see. Immediately, good for him, comes in ice cold, and immediately there's like a pick and pop, gets open for a 3. He unfortunately misses it. And then after that, OKC ends up hitting it out of bounds. So Indiana has a baseline out of bounds play. That turns into another turnover, a 5-second violation on TJ McConnell, and later on OKC is able to capitalize, getting another layup on the subsequent possession. You go from down 4, at that point you're down 11, and then a couple more minutes left in the quarter, and they end up closing the third quarter down 13 points, and it was basically all OKC the rest of the way in the fourth quarter. So looking at the game as a whole, we should probably start with the NBA champion, Oklahoma City Thunder. And of course, that starts with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. All things considered for the Game 7, he was pretty fantastic in this game. I really don't want to hear shit about efficiency or shooting percentage in Game 7. Like, those games are just different. Baskets are inevitably harder to come by. We've seen plenty of stars falter in Game 7. But at least Shai was like, we're living and dying by my play, right? He didn't have the best shooting night in the world, ended up shooting 8 of 27 from the field, but he was still good for 29 points when you think of all the free throws that he had as well. And it was honestly one of the best passing games of his entire career. I want to say he had 12 assists, just 1 turnover throughout the entire game as well, 2 blocks, 1 steal. Like, that's exactly what you want from your star player. Obviously, everybody's tight, everybody's thrown off a bit by that Haliburton injury, and he was still fantastic for the most part throughout the entire game. Chet Holmgren had a really big bounce back game after an abysmal performance in Game 6. 18 points, 8 rebounds, and most notably the 5 blocks on defense. Indiana really didn't have anything better to do on offense than go right at Chet Holmgren, whether it was TJ McConnell or Andrew Nembhard. There were a couple of blocks that he had where like they're trying to go body to body on him, and it's just easier said than done when you're dealing with somebody that's like 7'1" with a crazy wingspan. And Chet was where they needed him to be, even hit a 3 with confidence as a part of that big run in the third quarter. He was pretty great. And man, the second Caruso just checked into the game, you know, it feels so obvious. That's just a guy that you want on your team in any situation, in any battle that you're going to be in, but especially at Game 7. I mean, he was fucking awesome in this game. 10 points, 3 steals, a block, and just like dominated the game athletically. Like, there was one play that really stood out where like a cut to the rim, you know, a backdoor cut, Hartenstein finds him, he gets an easy dunk. He just looks like such a great athlete out there. And then like even going to the basket, he had a tough take on Pascal Siakam later in the first half. And then he misses it because it was great defense by Pascal. And he has this like sneaky, really strong double jump, and he just puts back his own miss. Huge energy play for the Thunder right there. Like we all saw a good Caruso game coming, but it was still really impressive to see, and it just highlights how much of an incredible pickup he was for the Thunder this past offseason. Dort was a real momentum shifter in this game. I mean, usual defensive impact that we could expect from Lou Dort, and really the highlight play was a miracle 3 late in the third quarter that really started that big Oklahoma City run that we kind of talked about. I think it was right before that sequence that I'd kind of laid out, but it was the end of a shot clock. The ball rolls out near the logo, and Dort just chucks a moon ball, drills it. At that point, you could tell the energy for the Pacers was off, and it was probably going to be all OKC the rest of the way, which it was. Jalen Williams, J-Dub, wasn't his best game by any means. He did bounce back from a rocky first half of the game, and it had a much stronger performance in the second half. I think he finished the game with like 15 points, but overall it wasn't necessarily as good of a performance as I was expecting, just based on how much I liked his shot selection in the previous 2 games. But honestly, they didn't need him all that much. He was still solid in the opportunities that he got. Isaiah Hartenstein was really solid in this game as well. Kind of expected a big Hartenstein game, especially with it just being a lot uglier. Typically in Game 7s, he was great on the boards, had some nice buckets as well. And Aaron Wiggins lost me a lot of money, man. I bet Aaron Wiggins to make 1 damn 3, tanked the entire parlay. Everything else was good. He had 1 look, only 1 shot at it, and he bricked it. So I'm not going to forget that Aaron Wiggins finishing with 0 points in the NBA Finals was rough, and honestly not something I was expecting. I felt really good about Wiggins getting some momentum, hitting a couple shots in front of the home crowd. They didn't end up needing it, though. It was all OKC during the fourth quarter of this one. Moving over to the Indiana side of things, especially looking at what they had to do post-Haliburton injury. I mean, Mathurin was huge in this game. 24 points, 13 rebounds, 3 assists, and a couple of steals as well. gave them a real shot in the game. I think, again, he kind of flew under the radar. I don't think he got enough love on the broadcast, especially for his contributions right after the Haliburton injury in that first half. Like, they needed him to be aggressive. I think he shot a little under 50%, but you're totally going to live with that. And just his athleticism and presence on the board is something that Indiana should feel really good about heading into next year. I know it's hard to think about next year after such a disastrous night, but I would honestly expect Mathurin to slide into the starting lineup and have a massive season next year and have a huge scoring regular season just with his upside. He's going to really be able to tap into that, assuming Indiana doesn't make any crazy moves. I'm expecting a big year from Mathurin next year. Siakam, he suffered quite a bit from the Haliburton injury as well. It just seemed like they did not have the means to get him the ball and get him enough looks. It was also pretty damning of Rick Carlisle to leave Siakam out for, I think, like a full 7-minute stretch in that third quarter and that big sequence that I outlined that really shifted the game. Siakam really wasn't on the court until like the final minute or two of that third quarter. And it was just tough to see, right? Because they were just ended up being a guy short, which we're going to talk more about. And you just can't have Siakam on the bench for that long. And I don't want to really bury Rick Carlisle here after I said he had an argument to be one of the greatest coaches of all times if he was able to pull off an upset last night. But it was tough to not see Siakam get the ball going and, not just having that point guard to get him involved and open up looks for him. He is a player that is proven to be much better when he's playing off of guys, when he's getting out, when he's running in transition. He can get you a bucket. He can take advantage of a mismatch, but that's not his game night in and night out. And that unfortunately showed up last night for the Pacers. TJ McConnell, it probably took me too long to mention this guy's name right now. He had a ridiculous stretch in the third quarter where I think he had 12 points and 12 consecutive Pacers points at that. But if we're being totally honest about the play of TJ McConnell, they kind of lived and died by McConnell at a certain point as well. He was overall fantastic in this game, but he had 7 turnovers, and really all of them were bad, right? I mean, a couple of them were just incredible defensive plays. I mean, that's exactly what OKC's historic defense will do to you. They will make great players look bad routinely, and unfortunately, that just happened to McConnell a few times. Like, he started off the game with just a cross-court pass where it's like, come on, dude, you cannot throw that on the Oklahoma City Thunder. Caruso picks it up. It's an easy layup the other way, and he got stripped by Case and Wallace. He dribbled into traffic a couple times. He kind of got to the basket with really no plan and kind of threw it up for grabs. Like, those are just the type of mistakes that, Haliburton just simply doesn't make, right? If you get a 5-turnover game from Tyrese Haliburton, you are in complete shock. Like, really his maybe best superpower as a basketball player, which is really saying something, is his ability to make plays for others without turning over the basketball. And that just feeds the fire that is OKC when you have 7 turnovers. Again, not blaming TJ McConnell. He wasn't expected to be in that situation where they really needed him, but it was crazy how much the Pacers were dependent on this guy to create everything for them in that stretch with no Siakam in the third quarter. Obi Toppin was just miserable in this game. I picked him to be my hero of Game 7. Did not end up coming through. I mean, he was 0 for 4, had 3 turnovers, and it honestly looked worse. Like, he was like the number one guy, especially on the rewatch when I was really paying attention to everybody's body language. Like, he looked like the guy that just was not ready for the moment. Like, his head was not in the right spot. He looked absolutely terrified to dribble. Both of his turnovers were just like bobbling the ball like out of bounds. I mean, it was rough for Obi. He never got into a rhythm whatsoever. I really did like Nembhard and his game in this one to kind of end on a positive note here for Indiana. 16 points, 6 assists, 5 rebounds. Honestly, would have preferred for him to be a little bit more aggressive during that third quarter stretch as well. And I think he was on the bench for a piece of that. I think they were rolling with Mathurin and McConnell at that point. But I really liked what I saw from Nembhard. I think he only had 2 turnovers, which against his defense in that situation wasn't too bad. I just would have preferred, just like Siakam, to have the ball kind of and have the offense run through Nembhard and Siakam the rest of the way. That probably would have given Indiana the best shot to win. Miles Turner, he didn't ultimately break out of the slump. He had some defensive plays, but missed a couple free throws. I think 3 total free throws. He did have a couple jumpers fall for him, but besides that, he was mostly a non-factor. And just overall, like, on the night for Indiana, like, really tough situation for them. And they just ended up being one guy short. Like, I'm analyzing this like I would any other game, just because they still had an opportunity to win a championship after such a tragic injury. Sucks for them to have to shift their focus to that, but that's the reality of the situation that they were in. And I think if just one other guy besides everyone that we just listed was going, obviously if Obi Toppin was hitting shots, if, Ben Shepherd, he got a wide open look that he completely clanked, right, and had a pretty bad turnover as well. Like, if one of those guys gets it going in any capacity, Indiana definitely would have had a shot to at least make that game competitive down the stretch in the fourth quarter. And That just didn't happen. And they lost their best player. They lost the guy that sets the tone for them. And again, their offense completely shifted. There were no more fast breaks. There were no more like wide open, easy looks. Everything looked very difficult offensively for Indiana, which is to be expected against that Thunder defense. But we've seen time and time again, this Indiana offense and the way that they all play together generate really good looks, even against this awesome defense. And that just didn't happen without Tyrese Haliburton. So that says a lot about his value. So let's take a minute just to focus on the NBA champion Oklahoma City Thunder. An incredible team and a very deserved title. We're going to talk more about anyone trying to disparage the title that OKC just had. And I really have no tolerance for that, no matter who the champion is, no matter what the situation, but especially when you have a team that won 68 games, that has an all-time season from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that had historically great defense and just a really impressive roster from top to bottom. Like, I think the right team ended up winning. I think the better team ended up winning. That's not to say that we don't know what would have happened had Haliburton stayed in the game. I think very likely that game would have been a lot closer. It could have gone either way. It's just one of those things that happens in sports every year. We're never going to know. So let's continue to respect OKC and the run that they just had. And it really starts with just like an incredible rebuild story. And it's a very deserving group of fans. I should start there. You know, a team that inherits the Seattle Sonics back in like, what was that, 2008? Something in that range, and immediately established themselves as some of the best fans in the NBA. You know, thought that they were going to get to the mountaintop in 2012 when they have Kevin Durant, they have James Harden, they have Russell Westbrook, they have Serge Ibaka. They make it to the NBA Finals against that Miami Heat team. They come up short. I think it ended up being a 5-game series, but it was a little bit more competitive than that if you looked at each and every game, if I'm remembering correctly. And then they don't make it back to the finals for 13 years, right? They have some runs after that. They make it to the conference finals a few times, and ultimately, as we all know, it ends with them losing Kevin Durant for nothing in the summer of 2016. The decision for him to sign with the Warriors. I'm sure Thunder fans can tell you where they were when that Player Tribune article dropped with KD announcing his intent to sign with the Warriors. And obviously you have a few fun Russell Westbrook years after that. I should mention, well before all of that, they traded away James Harden in an effort to, save some cap space and save some money for Serge Ibaka, let Harden do his own thing on the Rockets team. That obviously blew up in their face as well. And even when Russ leaves, I don't even remember what they got for Russ, if they traded him or let him sign away from free agency, but effectively the net of what they had with that incredible big three of KD, Harden, Russ, they really did not net much of anything. And especially just having Kevin Durant on his own and having him walk for nothing in free agency, it's just pretty hard for any franchise to sustain losing a talent like that for nothing. And they really just went 3 years without making the playoffs after losing KD. 3 years with no playoffs in a loaded Western Conference is a very small amount of time for when it comes to losing a player like Kevin Durant. And obviously, it really starts with the incredible move, not just to, everyone remembers the trade that set up this current Thunder team, in which they traded away Paul George in 2019 for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 5 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps. I think that's been pretty well documented at this point in time, that trade definitely shaped the Thunder and is the biggest individual factor as to why this team is so good. But just the move that Sam Presti made to acquire Paul George in the first place. Like, they were kind of a middle-of-nowhere team. It didn't really make sense for them to turn some young assets into Paul George. But in 2017, he said, fuck it. He trades Domantas Sabonis and Victor Oladipo for Paul George in 2017. Immediately, Paul George has arguably the best season of his career. I think he was like second or third for MVP voting in that year. He was fantastic. The Thunder had another disappointing run in the playoffs that year, but that was kind of par for the course with Westbrook and Paul George and everything like that. Now that they're here, right, they end up having Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as part of that return. He turns into an MVP. They cash in at least one of those first-round picks in that Clippers deal, turned into Jalen Williams. They still have, I think, at least 2 more Clipper picks that they need to convert on, which is pretty wild to think about. And it's just well-deserved. I mean, people have been saying for a very long time that Sam Presti is arguably one of the best, if not the best, general manager in all of basketball, so it's deserving that he gets one. And it's an all-time season from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as well. Talked about it a little bit on a previous podcast, scoring title, regular season MVP, finals MVP. He's a two-way player. He says and does the right things. You can call him corny. You can talk about the frustration of watching him with the foul baiting. I honestly felt like the foul baiting stuff wasn't as much of a story during the NBA Finals, which is great for him, great for basketball discourse as a whole, that didn't come up too much. Most of them were even either well-deserved fouls or just buckets that he was able to create on his own. He surpassed a lot of people all time. Not sure if you consider him more of a 1, more of a 2, but But you could make an argument for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being top 10 at really either of those positions is pretty safe. And, maybe you could even get higher than that on Shai if you value the independent success of this season alone. And they did it with defense and they did it with depth, right? It wasn't just Shai. They had a truly impressive roster. I would say 11 guys deep that you would feel comfortable playing in the NBA Finals. You got SGA, J-Dub, Chet, Ihart, Dort, Caruso, Wallace, Wiggins. Isaiah Joe didn't play much. Jalen Williams, the other one, didn't play much. Kenrich Williams had a few minutes here and there. But that's 11 real guys that are high-level two-way players that you'd feel comfortable throwing out in most matchups. This was a deserved run. And I know that you can, if you want to poke holes in the Thunder's run, you talk about what they get away with on defense and everything like that. That's because they do benefit a little bit from having the reputation of being all-world defenders before this. It's pretty well known that if you have a reputation of being a good defender, you're going to get away with a little bit more. And it really just speaks to Sam Presti being able to put this group together and Mark Daigneault pulling the right strings. But an incredible title run. They are really well set up for the future. How well set up, I don't know, because the Western Conference is loaded. And as we saw with the previous version of dominant Thunder teams with KD, Russ, and Harden, you can never, ever take this stuff for granted, right? I'm sure KD, Harden, Russ, they expected to have multiple swings at it in the NBA Finals and definitely would have expected to come away with at least one championship with that core. They never made it back to the finals again until now. And so the fact that they were able to cash in is well deserved, and they're going to be really well positioned for the next 5 to 10 years. Keeping it moving to the other side of the coin, I do want to spend a little bit more time talking about the Indiana Pacers and specifically the horrible Tyrese Haliburton injury. That was just a terrible moment for the NBA as a whole. Unfortunately, there was some discourse floating around, like questioning how healthy Tyrese Haliburton was, if he was leaning into that injury a little bit. And part of that, I do, just get it from a 10,000 foot perspective of just like, hey, he played really good in game 6. But we can just say he played really good in game 6 without questioning, how hurt is he? Is he leaning into it? Is he milking it? Whatever. We know he wasn't milking it. We know that this was a calf strain that you saw it on the play that he went down. Again, it was a very normal basketball play. He was just kind of dribbling, extended that right leg a little bit. And I'm just so frustrated at how many times we had to see it on the broadcast. If you haven't seen it, don't worry about it. Like, if you don't know what you're looking at, I guess the injury itself isn't really that graphic, right? You see gruesome shit in football all the time and whatever. But for those that know what an Achilles injury looks like, and you see the recoil on the calf, and we had to see it on the broadcast in mega HD like 5 or 6 times, it actually made me sick to my stomach. Like, I was having a glass of wine all fired up for the NBA Finals, and I had to put it down. I felt like I was going to fucking yak from seeing that shit. It made me so sick. I feel horrible for Tyrese Haliburton. Like, after the playoff run that he had a lot of haters, a lot of doubters, myself included. Really everybody, you couldn't really help but come around on the guy and come around on the team because of how well he was playing and the insane moments he was able to pull off. And you go from the biggest night of your entire life, of your entire career, to just absolute heartbreak for a Pacers franchise. Easily the most disastrous night in Pacers history. You start the night having an opportunity to close out an NBA title, and you end the night, you don't have a championship, and now your future is really in doubt because your franchise player just tore his Achilles in fucking July, dude. Like, it was so, I can speak to this because I saw it with Jason Tatum, and I just thought about how I felt in that Knicks series. Like, we're down 2-1. I'm thinking we're going to win another game and tie up the series and go back to Boston and everything's going to be great. And you go from having real title aspirations to now everything's in doubt. And that's exactly the same situation as Indiana. Even worse because you got even closer to that ultimate goal of a championship, and even worse because it's a full month later and you have to deal with this year-long injury at an unheard of. This is the latest game you could have played in. And I just feel so bad for Tyrese Haliburton. There's really not much more to say on it. I don't understand why this keeps happening. The dude is 25. Tatum was 27. I don't know a ton about Achilles injuries. I know they used to be known as more of like an old man injury, and they're repeatedly more common. We saw it earlier in the playoffs with Damian Lillard as well. So that's just 3 superstar players in the playoffs alone. I think it was a total of 8 players in the NBA this year. They're getting more popular. I've seen mixed messages about like, hey, the calf and the Achilles are separate injuries. And then on the biggest stage, maybe it's just coincidence, but we've seen it twice with calf injuries turning into Achilles injuries during the NBA Finals. So I can't help but question that a little bit. I'm not a doctor. I tried to do some research online. I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to share my findings with not having that medical background, so I'll spare you guys of that. But it's really messed up, and I am very frustrated with the broadcast for how they showed the injury so many times. I also didn't like that they had to show the losing tunnel immediately after the Thunder won the title. It felt like there was like a 2-minute video feed of the tunnel, and it felt like they were doing it because they wanted to show Haliburton on crutches and his teammates like greeting him. But that's an extremely emotional moment for everybody involved, and felt like it definitely should have been kept private. There's one point where McConnell's mom is like telling the cameraman to like get out of there, and that was totally warranted. That's one of those things that if I see that footage on Twitter after the game, it's like, whatever, that's fine. I get why that exists, and somebody should be documenting it and whatever. It doesn't need to be on the primary broadcast seconds after the title, right? There are happy things that we can focus on. There is a deserving team of awesome characters that just achieved their lifelong goal. Like we can't just focus on that, but whatever. Maybe I'm just getting old yelling at clouds, whatever. On the Haliburton injury and on the future of the Pacers, one thing I want to note, I'm not going to call this a silver lining, but I will say a move that does look good by the Pacers, and one shred of positivity in this absolute disaster is that less than a week ago, the Pacers made a deal with the New Orleans Pelicans, a trade in which they acquired their own first-round pick in 2026 in exchange for their first-round pick this year, which is the number 23 pick in Wednesday's draft. So again, the number 23 pick this year for their first-round pick next year. That was a deal between the Pacers and the Pelicans. Now, obviously, that move in real time last week was done because it gave the Pacers a little bit more roster flexibility, right? They don't need to bring somebody else onto the rotation. They didn't really need anybody else right about now anyways. It allowed them more salary cap structure down the line. They would have to pay that draft pick a little bit later and everything like that. And I saw Bobby Marks go into the weeds a little bit and why it made a lot of financial sense for the Pacers to do that deal. Not knowing, obviously, that the tragedy that would take place last night, their best player gets hurt. He's going to be out for almost certainly all of next year. And so obviously that Pacers stock for next year and the chances that they finish high in the Eastern Conference has been reduced significantly. And the odds are that pick is going to be better than 23, right? That you would feel a lot better about that being around 15, right? I don't want to go much lower than that just because I do think the East is pretty weak, like we're going to talk about. And the Pacers obviously have some magic in their coaching staff and the way that they handle business. So maybe they end up being good again, but it's just more likely that they have a tough season next year with no Tyrese Haliburton. So that's the aftermath of the Haliburton injury. You have Achilles injuries that have really taken three of the best teams in the East mostly out of the mix next year in Boston, Indiana, and Milwaukee, right? And so with that being wide open, it was already the weaker conference. You wonder, does a team like Detroit make a swing, right? Do the Cavs try to go big and kind of retool a little bit? I mean, they could run it back and they would be the heavy favorites to come out of the East next year. You have the Knicks, right? They don't even have a head coach right about now. Do you fire Tom Thibodeau if you realize how open the East is next year? Do the Hawks make a move, right? There's just a lot of unknown in the Eastern Conference right about now because everything is wide open. Obviously, it's due to sad circumstance, but it's going to make for a very entertaining offseason, and I expect more trades in the Eastern Conference to come. And a little rant I wanted to go on just like real quick, and I could probably make this rant every single time there's a new champion. It seems like everybody's favorite thing, and really since like the 2020 title in which the Lakers won in the bubble, and people called it like a Mickey Mouse ring, and they tried to disparage the legitimacy of the championship just because of the circumstance that the Lakers won. You know, that one, at least admittedly, was a pretty weird circumstance, but they were still the champs. They were still the best team this year, right? You know, the Celtics took a lot of shit just with all the injury luck that went their way along their road to the title in 2024, even though they lost, 3 games throughout the entire postseason. So it's pretty safe to say the Celtics deserved it too. And this year is not going to be any different. It might even be worse just because of, again, the tragic circumstance of Haliburton's injury and, having it happen before what could have been an all-time Game 7. I understand the frustration, especially if you're an Indiana fan or whatever, but you don't just go and disparage the team that won 68 games, that was the better team heading into this. Like, it's very likely they would have won the title anyway. They're the ones holding the trophy. You can do this shit in sports every year. And I know people are just trolling, and I was probably on Twitter for way too long last night, but like, just fuck everybody that's trying to disparage the title. Fuck everybody that's saying Mickey Mouse ring, that's saying it's not legit, that's saying it's because Haliburton got hurt. Like, we just don't need it. We don't need it. Because guess what? If those sad, sad people are lucky enough to see their team eventually win that title, they're going to wish that the Mickey Mouse, like, fake title crowd, they're going to wish they never existed. They're going to feel hopefully bad about saying that shit about other titles, because the reality is you could do this what if situation with every single title in the history of sports. And so there's no place for that type of negativity. So I just wanted to call it out a little bit. Like, this year is no different. The Thunder, I'm never going to disparage this title. And as much as I hate the Lakers and didn't want to see them win in 2020, I didn't disparage it then either. I certainly didn't do it with my Celtics last year. Like, a title is a title. It's what we talk about all this shit for. I think there should be a higher level of respect that we put on for the Oklahoma City Thunder and all those players independently. Like, their legacies are changed because they won, and we don't need to spend any time disparaging it because of injuries or any shit like that. While I'm giving out some FUs, fuck you to the Knicks fans as well. I know not all Knicks fans are bad people. I'm just saying I saw probably I was the most upset with Knicks fans last night. It seemed like Haliburton really hurt their feelings, man. Like, a lack of sympathy, we'll say, for Pacers fans and for Haliburton because of his behavior on the court and because he talks shit. It's just like, man, you are so sorry. You're so sorry that this man hurt your feelings so bad. I know that is, again, a very small percentage of Knicks fans, but let's just be real. New York fans don't have the best reputation. I don't think they did anything to bolster that from what I saw on Twitter last night. So just a reminder, if you're feeling anything but extremely upset about the Haliburton injury, you really got to look in the mirror. And you also got to ask yourself, do you really like basketball too? Like, if you're not sitting there like feeling like you're robbed of what could have been an all-time Game 7, we haven't got one of these things in 9 years, and immediately it's like the balloon is popped. Worldwide Wob on Twitter said it best. He was like, this feels like we're at a buffet and I'm not hungry anymore. I'm sick and I can't eat and I'm at the buffet. Like, that's exactly what it was like last night. Like, all that excitement heading into the game was drained by that injury. And so, F anybody that's saying otherwise. And just while we're, judging people on Twitter, one more FU. I got to take a little shot at some Sixers fans too. I've seen very hard pivot here to the NBA draft. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of fan bases, and mainly Sixers fans just taking shots at Ace Bailey, who's a major prospect who is going to be drafted at some point on Wednesday. Just for a little bit of context, Ace is the only U.S. prospect that has not worked out for a single NBA team. Very questionable decision. It just seems like the kid put his faith in the wrong agency group and put his trust in the wrong people, and he's getting some bad advice. And it is bad. I understand why you're frustrated if you're the Sixers and the guy cancels the workout at the last second and didn't work out for anybody else. But to just be like calling this 18-year-old kid like, hey, he's a clown, or he's stuck up, or he thinks he's better than us, and all this shit, like, just get over yourself, man. If you can't separate that this kid just got signed to the wrong agency, and, if you want to take it out on Lifestyle Sports and Omar Cooper or whatever his agent's name is, like, do that. But because by all accounts, if you do your own research and kind of dive into that a little bit, it just seems like that agency is taking advantage of the kid and kind of making him an example and giving him some really questionable advice on the heels of Shedeur Sanders falling like 5 rounds in the NFL draft. And we have this guy that was supposed to go 3, and now he's looking like he could be a late lottery guy. Obviously, we'll see what happens there, but let's just remind Sixers fans and any other fans, like, taking shots at an 18-year-old for not working out with your team, it's going to be all right. The draft is a complete crapshoot anyway. Ace could be a stud. He could be a bust. But him deciding to work out for your team or not, it's not having any effect over that as well. So I think that covers all of the conversation and all the talking points I had in my head surrounding Game 7 last night. So let's talk about the other major news that dropped yesterday morning. And that is, of course, the trade that sent Kevin Durant from Phoenix to the Houston Rockets. And gut reaction of this trade is like, man, I really liked the move right away for the Houston Rockets. I think it was a very fair price to pay for Kevin Durant. And as the day went on, and now as I sit here over 24 hours removed from the deal, I like it even more for the Rockets, man. Like, it's a great deal for what they paid for Kevin Durant. And then when you realize what they didn't trade for Kevin Durant, it makes you feel even better about what the Rockets paid. And let's talk a little bit more about that. Just to get you guys the context around the Kevin Durant deal, the trade was Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the number 10 pick in Wednesday's draft, and 5 second-round picks to Phoenix in exchange for Kevin Durant, who went to Houston. And so let's start there, right? Jalen Green, obviously, he was like the former, number 3 pick in the draft. Still an elite athlete, still has a ton of potential, but I think that run of Jalen Green, can he be a number 1 option? Can he be a number 2 option? I think at least on a playoff team, I think that's come to an end based on his performance in round 1 against the Warriors this year. I mean, he was terrible. He did have one game where he couldn't miss. I think he had 30-something points, but I think he was single-digit scoring basically every other game. He just couldn't hang with the heightened playoff intensity, with the heightened defensive pressure that the Warriors put on him. They were licking their chops going at him on the defensive end of the court. They were comfortable leaving him open on offense. It was really about as bad of a playoff series as you're going to get from a guy with real expectations heading into that series. So as much as it is still a decent get because he's young and he could develop if he just gets to cook on a bad team, I don't think the Rockets feel bad about giving him away. And as far as like the list of prospects that they have on their team, if you were to organize guys by trade value, Şengün is way above him in value, Amen Thompson way above him in value. Probably Jabari Smith, you'd probably rather have him. You might even rather have Tari Eason just for what he brings to a winning team. So they're not feeling too bad about parting ways with Jalen Green, I'd imagine. Dillon Brooks is a guy that took a lot of shit during the playoffs a couple years ago when he's like randomly, a part of that really hateable Memphis team and he was shit talking LeBron. But, all that put to the side, he's a really great defender. He is definitely has his own identity. He brings a toughness to a team that's hard to deny. And every once in a while, he just doesn't miss from three. And he'll sink 10 threes on your favorite team. Trust me, it happened to me and my Celtics during the regular season this year. So he's a solid player. We know he can play in the playoffs. So it is a good get, but he's really just salary filler on that. The number 10 pick in this year's draft, it is supposed to be a pretty good draft. We'll see if something crazy happens. Maybe Ace Bailey falls that far. I mean, who knows who's going to be there? I'm not super buttoned up on these draft guys, but Phoenix better have somebody that they really like because that is arguably the best asset that they got in that Kevin Durant deal. And the 5 second-round picks, I could care less. Now, to give Phoenix a crumb of credit, they've actually been pretty good at drafting in the second round recently. I want to say they got two of their better rotation players, and Ryan Dunn, I think he was a second-round pick. I think Oso Iguodala was a second-round pick too. Like, they've weirdly hit on some second-round picks, and they've hit on some other guys in the past in the second round that I'm kind of blanking on. So maybe they're able to turn that around, but that's really brings you no value in the 5 second-round picks. So again, very fair price to pay for Kevin Durant. Like, I'm not going to go crazy and say that he needed to have a bunch of firsts and you needed to have more young talent. I think you just needed to have one of those two pools because Kevin Durant is still, when he's right, when he's healthy, he's probably still close to top 10. You can argue him in the top 10. You can't put him outside the top 15, 20. Like, he was awesome last year for the most part. And he's been in horrible basketball situations ever since the Brooklyn team during the 10 games in which him and Kyrie and Harden actually all played together. He's been in bad basketball situations ever since. Now, you can blame Kevin Durant for about 99% of that because he made the decision to request that trade to Phoenix and, they didn't have the right pieces in place for him to really just be the best version of himself as a basketball player. They've been asking him to do way too much on the defensive end of the court. Phoenix didn't really have any bigs that they could depend on. They didn't have a true point guard to set them up. I mean, it was a nightmare. And now he goes into this situation with a Rockets team that was perfect for Kevin Durant. Like, we kind of outlined this on the last podcast or a couple podcasts ago, whatever, that Houston was the most obvious team in need of Kevin Durant's skill set. Like, yes, I'd probably talk myself into it if the Spurs traded for him, and even Miami could have been really frisky in an open East next year, but Houston made the most sense far and away. They needed a shot creator, somebody that could get his own bucket. They needed an end-of-game guy. They needed a leader and somebody that they could trust, again, with the game on the line, and Kevin Durant is absolutely that. And he gets to be in a situation where he gets to be the one that's hiding on defense, right? Like, Fred VanVleet, he just had his team option decline today. It sounds like they're going to work out a new contract. Like, he's obviously small. You can hunt Fred VanVleet in certain matchups, but he's mostly a dog on defense, and he's going to lock up most of the small guards that he's playing against. Obviously, Amen Thompson is a first-team All-NBA defender. Tari Eason's a dog on defense. Jabari Smith works his ass off. You have Şengün, who has his own question marks, but at least he clears the glass and whatever. You have Steven Adams coming in off the bench. KD and Steven Adams get to be reunited. So he's just in such a perfect basketball situation, and all they had to give up was the number 10 pick, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, in a couple of seconds. So moving on to what they didn't trade, right? Part of the reason why Houston was in such an advantageous situation to trade for Kevin Durant is they have just such a wealth of young players that have real trade value. Like, they had the number 3 pick in last year's draft, albeit a weak draft class. I was really high on Reed Shepherd and his potential. I'm so excited that this trade actually could be even better because this could open up a lot of minutes for Reed Shepherd. Same thing as Cam Whitmore. He was a lottery pick a couple years ago as well that has had some insane athleticism and scoring flashes, and I've really liked watching him. They also kept guys like Jabari Smith, Tari Eason. Obviously, Amen Thompson was never going to be in that deal. And Houston has Phoenix's 2027 unprotected first-round pick and a 2029 Phoenix pick swap, right? So when you look at all that, like, the Suns, they couldn't get that 2027 pick. They couldn't get at least the swap rights back in 29. Like, they couldn't get any of those young talents. Like, it felt like Reed Shepherd probably would have been the most affordable of that group, just because him or Whitmore, I guess, just because those guys weren't even getting consistent minutes on the Rockets last year. So it's just really damning when you look at Phoenix. Like, they are in a spot where, like, yes, Kevin Durant wanted to be traded. They wanted to trade Kevin Durant. They wanted capital in this draft, so they were trying to make the move. And the clock was kind of ticking at that point, I guess. But you're now in a situation where you really got to nail the number 10 pick. And the Rockets, when I just like look at their situation moving forward, they are way better situated than I realized when I actually combed through those draft picks, because like the 27 Phoenix pick we mentioned, they also have the Nets unprotected 2027 first round pick as well, and some of their own picks. So the Rockets are really well situated. It's scary, close to what the Thunder have going on as well. And so as we're kind of moving on and taking a look at how this deal affects the rest of the league, I do just kind of want to revisit the Memphis-Orlando trade from last week that sent Desmond Bane to Orlando. Part of the reason I was so low on that deal, in addition to the fact I've just never been a big Desmond Bane guy, part of the reason I was so low on this deal for the Magic is I was like, man, they're giving up Phoenix's first round pick next year, and that's going over to Orlando. And now, like, the big question in determining what the value of that pick would be, we just kind of got the early results back as far as the return on the Durant trade, and I'm not that impressed. You only got Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks. Now, I guess the positive thing you can say about it is like, hey, the number 10 pick, at least they're cashing in on that, a couple days from now. So you're bringing in 3 players for the Durant deal right away. But, you didn't get a Reed Shepherd. You didn't get some, guys that I feel like are real difference makers for Kevin Durant. If they had done a deal with the Spurs or the Timberwolves or any other team out there, I feel like they would have gotten more that helps their team for next year. But I feel like Phoenix is just going to be such a dumpster fire after the return that they got. Like, it's really a humiliation ritual for Devin Booker at this point. The fact that he has to share a backcourt with Bradley Beal and Jalen Green at this point, like, those are, I think the Beal and Green hate kind of go too far in a nutshell, to be honest with you. Like, some of the shots that I see fired at those guys, it's like they are just miserable NBA players, which they aren't. But I just don't think that they are conducive to winning, and they are certainly not the type of players you would want to pair in the backcourt with Devin Booker. Nobody's going to be playing any defense. Nobody's going to be generating him easy looks. I'm just so skeptical of what the Suns are going to be next year. And the sad part is that they still are probably going to get their second, third, and fourth best players through this deal, right? Because after Devin Booker, their second best player right away is probably Dillon Brooks. Their third best player is probably Jalen Green. And, after that, I'm assuming whoever they get at number 10 might have a good chance of being their fourth best player, because the rest of the roster, it's like, I don't know what to think of Bradley Beal at this point. It seems like he is just fine mailing it in each and every year. Like, Ryan Dunn has flashes, like Iguodala, whatever, like Nick Richards. It's just, there's not a lot of talent in Phoenix, and they're playing in a loaded Western Conference. So the positive thing that you can say about the Magic in that deal is, hey, this deal aged well because we went all in for next year, and now, unfortunately, Pacers, their situation has gotten way worse for next year, so maybe that's more of a reason to do the deal. But I would argue the other side of the coin is like, hey, maybe you could have just been really good next year anyway and held on to that Phoenix pick and gotten like a high lottery pick next year. So we'll see how that works out. The last thing I wanted to talk about is just looking at the Suns and asking if that was truly the highest price out there for Kevin Durant. I don't know if that's true, right? KD made it public that his list of teams that he wanted to go to were the Rockets, the Spurs, and the Heat. But if you're the Suns and there are other teams outside of those three making offers for Kevin Durant, like, what do you care if you're the Phoenix Suns about Kevin Durant's feelings at this point? Like, as much as like you love and respect KD, and he seems to be a very well-liked guy, and you did bring an NBA legend into your franchise that you traded for or whatever, like, you didn't win shit. Every single year was a disappointment. How much of a disappointment, you can argue about that, whatever. But like, that guy really didn't do anything to change the momentum of your franchise. And now he wants to be traded. Like, whoever has the best price should be getting Kevin Durant and let them figure it out with the contracts and whatever. Now, maybe when KD listed those three teams, like, those other teams outside of the three just stop being interested altogether, because if you're not going to be able to sign KD to an extension, and that's probably coming for the Rockets right now, what's the point of trading for him? I get all that, and it is kind of hard to sift through this information and see what's legit and what's not. But I will just say, the Wolves were pretty interested in Kevin Durant. I saw stuff out there that there was a package that included Gobert, Dante DiVincenzo, Rob Dillingham, and maybe a pick on top. Again, I don't know how real that is, but if it was, that is easily a much better price for Phoenix. It makes them more competitive for next year, and they don't have their own picks. So I would have taken that Wolves package and not thought twice about it. A report came out today of Kevin O'Connor from Yahoo saying that the Cavs allegedly offered Darius Garland as part of their Kevin Durant package, which, if you get Garland for Durant one-on-one, I think that is outright a better package than what they got for Kevin Durant. Now, obviously, Garland's a smaller guard. He's had his injury issues, whatever. He's a guy that actually kind of makes more sense in the backcourt with Devin Booker and is just independently way more valuable than the guys that they got. I find that package to be hard to believe as well. So it's just interesting. I wonder if more smoke is going to come out about offers that didn't get accepted or maybe got pulled back or whatever within the next couple of days. But overall, nutshell reaction on the trade. I love it for Houston. I do not like the return that Phoenix got for Kevin Durant. And I think Houston's going to be really well situated to make a run in the West next year. Well, right as I was wrapping up this podcast and was about to tell you some bullshit about the Lakers being sold, we just had a massive trade. Well, not massive for the casual NBA fan, but massive for me as a Celtics fan. Celtics just traded away Jrue Holiday to the Portland Trailblazers for Anthony Simons and a couple of second-round picks. As far as we know right now, according to Shams Charania of ESPN, that is the full trade package that's been reported. So, gut reaction right now to that deal is I'm bummed, not because of the return, and obviously most people kind of knew this was coming. It's just like now it's reality that like the 2024 Boston Celtics title team is like now falling apart. And I just loved having Jrue Holiday on my team. He was obviously on a very lucrative contract that no longer made a lot of sense with the second apron stuff and just most likely not being a competitive team next year without Jason Tatum for probably all of the season. So it all just makes sense, but like gut reaction is I'm just bummed. I really loved having Jrue Holiday on my team for 2 years. Obviously, last year he was a bit better. There were some signs of regression this year, especially didn't love the offensive output in the playoffs and stuff like that. Even the defense might have taken a half step back, but Jrue's been a part of 2 championship teams for a reason. He's an absolute legend in Milwaukee as well, and I don't think we even win the 2024 title without him. A clip organically came across my timeline of Jrue just clamping Kyrie Irving's shit in the finals in like game 3, I want to say, last year that I really enjoyed. And it was like, wow, he was a menace. And him and Derek White were the all intangibles backcourt of every coach's dreams. Like it was just nothing but fond memories in Jrue Holiday's short stint in Boston. So gut reaction as a human, pretty bummed about it. I'm just sad that I have to come face reality when it comes to this Celtics team being taken apart. There's definitely going to be more moves to come. But looking at it, putting my analysis hat on and trying to be a little bit unbiased, I do think the return for Jrue Holiday is very solid. Anthony Simons has been a fantastic scorer out in Portland for years now. He's arguably their most talented offensive player. He doesn't really fit the mold of a Boston Celtic based on what we've looked for in our guards the past couple of years. Like even Peyton Pritchard, despite being smaller, is still can be a plus defender just with how much effort he gives and his ability to guard other small guards. I don't think we've seen the same fire from Anthony Simons. Now he's been able to skate by in Portland quite a bit, but again, fantastic offensive player. He's on a 4-year, $100 million deal, and he's on an expiring contract, so he'll be an unrestricted free agent after this current NBA season, whereas Jrue Holiday, he signed a 4-year, $134 million contract about a year ago at this point. So Jrue has several more years on the deal. The average annual value of Anthony Simons' contract is $25 million, while Jrue's is like $33 million, something like that. So it definitely saves the Celtics quite a bit of money on its own, at least if I'm understanding that correctly. It does save the Celtics some money. And the way I'm looking at it with Anthony Simons is like, again, we already have Peyton Pritchard. We obviously have Jaylen Brown, who should be healthy coming off his meniscus injury heading into next year. Like we have a lot of guys that can handle the rock. We still have Derek White. I would love to see him in a role that's even more scaled up. I just have nothing but confidence in Derek White. So like, I kind of look at just getting Anthony Simons because he's an expiring contract. And maybe there's even a double trade situation here, because I think there are some other teams out there that could use more of a ball dominant, like offensive option. And I feel like Anthony Simons was rumored to be in deals to like Orlando around the trade deadline this past year. Obviously, they presumably have that need filled now that they went out and traded for Desmond Bane. Maybe Miami can use another ball dominant guard. I don't really know. I don't have a full list in front of me, and my brain's barely functioning at this hour anyways. But needless to say, I do think just because he's on an expiring contract, he has a known desirable skill set and ability to shoot and score the basketball at a high level. You can never get enough guys that have that ability to create. So I just feel like there's going to be a market for Anthony Simons. I didn't expect him to stay on the Celtics. That's at least my gut right now. I just am having a hard time imagining him fitting into the team for next year. Maybe we're just saying F it and there's way more moves to come, and we're going to need somebody to jack up shots if there are more moves, and we do get rid of one of the other guys in Pritchard or White or Jaylen Brown. But honestly, those three weren't guys that I had in mind to be moved, so I'm still thinking we have a decent guard rotation. So we'll see if there are more moves to come, but gut reaction, it is nice that we were the ones getting a couple extra second picks. We didn't have to pay a price just to move off of Jrue Holiday's contract. Again, Simons is a lot younger. Simons does have a market out there. I just don't know about his fit with Boston. And worst comes to worst, we're getting out of that cap situation. We're just lifting that contract off of our books if we just hold Anthony Simons through all of next year. So that could be a pretty decent option for Brad Stevens as well. Again, I am bummed about it. I loved having Jrue Holiday on my team. It sucks that it doesn't feel like, as of right now, with that first domino to fall, that the Celtics are still going to try to be really competitive for next year. Like, I'm kind of talking myself into making a run as we continue to progress further into the offseason, obviously on the heels of the Haliburton news, on the basis of the East just being wide open. Like, even if you take Tatum off the Celtics, like, I feel like we still have a fantastic coach. We still have a great core in place. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just drinking that offseason Kool-Aid. But first move to come, I would expect guys like Kristaps Porzingis, Sam Hauser, they're pretty likely to get dealt within the next couple of weeks as well. So definitely stay tuned, and we will cover any future Boston Celtics moves on this podcast. No questions asked. And finally, the last thing I want to discuss, just some quick Lakers talk for you guys. Nothing like reverting back to some Celtics-Lakers talk at the end of a podcast in which we just covered the 2025 NBA champions, but that's just how the NBA works, man. We got the draft in a couple days, so we got off-season storylines popping up left and right. As much as I want to just show some love to the Thunder and the Game 7 that we had last night, I am forced to talk about everything else in the world of basketball, and the Lakers really inserted themselves into the conversation during NBA Finals week, just like they did last year when they hired J.J. Redick as head coach. This year, the franchise was sold from the Buss family to Mark Walter, who is a very successful businessman and also is an owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers, who have, from my understanding, I'm going to talk a little baseball right now. I think the Dodgers got a pretty big payroll, so it's well reported that Mark Walter has extremely deep pockets, which is a benefit to the Lakers now. It is worth noting that the Buss family was beloved, right? I think they've had the team for decades and obviously have had a lot of titles, a lot of success, a lot of star players pass through the Lakers organization during the time in which the Buss family owned it. But what's been pretty funny is looking at the reporting since this transaction took place, in which, again, the Lakers were sold. It was a $10 billion valuation of the franchise. It wasn't necessarily an outright $10 billion sale, just because I guess Mark Walter has been a minority owner of the Lakers for a while now. He just bought the Buss family's share of it, so it wasn't a full $10 billion, but that's what they're valuing the total franchise at. For reference, the Celtics were outright sold for $6 billion just a couple of months ago, so obviously it does make sense the Lakers are in a bigger market. They are probably a more popular team, so their valuation is higher. They also have Luka and LeBron on this team, so all that in mind, just going from an owner, a known commodity that people really liked, that they clearly treated their star players well, you would think this has a chance to blow up in the Lakers' face. It definitely does if this new guy weirdly has a different mindset with the Lakers than he does the Dodgers, or maybe he's just a dick and everybody ends up hating him and he ends up messing some things up and, putting his hands in the GM's business, and, people always hate that. So it's definitely possible, but based on what we know about this guy and his ownership with the Dodgers, it seems like he's pretty hands off, and it also seems like he has very deep pockets. And it's just kind of funny that since this deal took place, people have been reporting that while the Buss family was beloved, they kind of ran the team like a family business. They didn't have the deepest pockets when it comes to NBA ownership standards, and some of those things that owners can spend on that is outside of the salary cap. The Lakers were not ranking very highly in those categories, right? Like spending on facilities, spending on analytics and staff, spending on healthcare and medical things. Like, the Lakers just were not top of class in those fields, and the assumption around the NBA is now that they have Mark Walter, that is going to change. And now it is even more dangerous that there are deeper pockets to pay guys, go into the luxury tax, reach that second apron if push comes to shove, and the Lakers have a chance to win the title. It seems like Mark Walters can be willing to do that, and he's probably going to have more money to spend on all the non-basketball things that do help in the long term when you are running a franchise. So overall, this is probably bad for the rest of the league. The Lakers have access to deeper pockets and everything like that, but I'm just throwing it out there. It could blow up in their face if this guy does mess things up, because the Buss family was known. And I don't know if it's going to be enough, man. I just wanted to rain in the Lakers parade a little bit here. Watching the finals, watching how physical it was, how demanding it was for these two young, exciting, athletic teams to go 7 games. It is making me feel more like basketball is a young man's game. And I just don't know, with the lack of youth on the Lakers roster and having to hide, for the most part, 2 guys in Luka and LeBron defensively, I just kind of wonder if that style of play is going to work, hiding both of those guys. Obviously, they are all-time great players, all-time great talents. I'm just saying, putting them on the same basketball court at the same time in this version of the NBA, it would have been a no-brainer. Like, these guys will win multiple championships 10 years ago. I just don't know if that's the same case right now. And especially when you look around at the rest of the Western Conference, the defense, the athleticism of teams, obviously like OKC. Houston got a lot better. Like we talked about earlier in this podcast, I'm just so bullish on what they're going to look like, especially with a veteran like Kevin Durant in the mix. Minnesota just ran LA out of the gym last year. San Antonio is certainly on the up and up as well. Denver has owned that matchup with the Lakers the past couple years as well. Like, there's just a lot of teams in the Western Conference, at least 4 on paper in OKC, Houston, Minnesota, and Denver, that as of right now, again, this is June 23rd or whatever, as of right now, I like those 4 teams a lot more than the Lakers, and that is pretty surprising because I'm also very bullish on what Luka and LeBron can do together. So we'll see. Obviously, full offseason to come. The Lakers need to get busy. They need to get some front court depth first and foremost, and we know that the team that they had during the playoffs last year is not what they're going to have heading into next year. We know it was an incomplete roster. They weren't expecting to get Luka at the deadline. It was a transition year for them, all that stuff. But the pressure's on because obviously you have LeBron in some of the final years of his career. You have Luka in the prime of his career. The clock is ticking, and there's a lot of pressure on them to make some moves and get competitive, and it's just going to be easier said than done to compete with all the youth and athleticism in the Western Conference right now. So that's going to do it for this podcast today. Went all over the place, but just to wrap it all up, congratulations again to your 2025 NBA champion, Oklahoma City Thunder. Very deserved title run, very deserved Finals MVP in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So very happy for all the Thunder fans out there. Shout out my guy, Brendan. Biggest Thunder fan I know. He's been cheering for this team for decades now. He's been through the shit with the rebuild, so happy for guys like him on a day like today. Obviously, the heart goes out to all the Pacers fans out there. Just sucks that such an awesome night, such a great day in basketball with the trade and the Game 7 could be marred by injury. But unfortunately, I think that's what a lot of people are going to remember when they think about this year, is the insane run that the Pacers had. Just to have that tragedy strike in Game 7 is really kind of bogus, but that's what happens in sports sometimes, man. That's what kind of keeps us coming back, is the drama, the unexpected nature. Sometimes it doesn't work out, and we're definitely wishing Tyrese Haliburton and the Pacers the best for next year. Obviously, we cover the Durant trade as well. Got a little live reaction to the Jrue Holiday trade as well, which, again, bummed to see Jrue go, but pretty happy with the move for my Boston Celtics. I think it's a savvy move to get back an expiring contract and a guy that we might be able to flip again. Didn't have to give up any contracts to get out of Jrue Holiday, and at the very least, we hold on to Anthony Simons for this year, and his contract expires after this season. So, like that move for my Boston Celtics, and had to cover the Lakers sale as well. So, on the way out on this podcast, just wanted to say that the draft is somehow in less than 48 hours at the time I'm recording this. Just wild. Hate that it's on Wednesday. Every draft has been on Thursday, as far as I can remember. NFL draft, NBA draft, the only drafts I care about. The tune, the process of watching the draft on the big screen and following it on Twitter and trying to figure out what moves are taking place. Like, draft night is always awesome. I'm just bummed they'd mess up the tradition just because they wanted to money grab and make the second round its own night. But again, now instead of it being on Thursday, it's on Wednesday. If they really wanted to do that money grab, they should have left round 1 on Thursday and just made round 2 on Friday. But nobody asked me. I'm sure they have somebody monitoring the TV ratings and trying to get the most money, and made more sense to move it to Wednesday. So whatever. Draft on Wednesday. I don't know much about the prospects. I'm going to be hammering some YouTube highlights and just kind of parachute in and, maybe give you some guys I like. But I am just interested to see if there's any risers, if there's any fallers, obviously what my Celtics end up doing, if anything. interested to see where Ace Bailey lands on the heels of this workout scandal or whatever you want to call it the past couple days. But should be a really fun draft. Got an elite player at the top with Cooper Flagg and the Dallas Mavericks getting their chance at redemption as well. So going to be a lot of fun to watch. I should be recording. I'm not sure if I'll do it on Thursday after round one because that's all the relevant picks. Or if there are rumors of there being more trades and everything like that, maybe I'll wait till after round two on Thursday and then record on Friday. But you can expect a podcast from me either Thursday or Friday of this week. So before I let you guys go, be sure to follow At Words with Wallace on everything. That includes Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. At Words with Wallace on social media, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. I'm going to be cranking out some reels this week because I've definitely been neglecting the social media content lately. Focus on the finals and everything like that, but expect some more reels from me. So definitely make sure you're following on socials as well. And I will talk to you guys later this week. Enjoy the draft. Peace.